When Dragon Ball Super was first announced back in 2015, a lot of us were filled with excitement and hope. We had been waiting for an all-new Dragon Ball series after Dragon Ball GT had let a lot of us down following the end of Z. Dragon Ball had become very popular outside of its Japan due to its widely appealing and easily accessible storyline, as well as the unforgettable characters that feature within it. The thought of seeing Goku and the others go on new adventures was very promising. But just what had happened to Dragon Ball Super? Why is it that Super had struggled to live up to the legacy of what had come before it? In this video, I want to explain in detail why Dragon Ball Super had so many shortcomings. Now, I want to preface that I'm not being negative for the sake of criticism. Each opinion that I present within this video is backed up with some solid reasoning. When it comes to Dragon Ball, I'm really passionate about the series, but after so much time has passed, I feel a weird disconnect with Dragon Ball Super. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Goku's character and how it was simplified within Super. I'll be discussing how Vegeta was sidelined as a character, and in general, how several other characters were sidelined and how their character development had regressed from what was established within the original manga. In addition to this, I'll be talking about the plethora of new transformations and power-ups that feature within Super, and how I think that they feel like cheap cash grabs, which offer nothing of substance to the storyline aside from showing us a flashy new form. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll understand why Dragon Ball Super had fallen short on so many levels, and why this series had so much potential to be something different, but ultimately it faltered. So without further delay, here's my video breaking down all of the issues that I have with Dragon Ball Super. Dragon Ball Super has a lot of commercial interest behind it, since Dragon Ball is one of the most popular franchises in the world. For this reason, the existence of Dragon Ball Super is driven by a lot of commercial interest. And this is partly the reason why we have so many new forms and transformations, which feel like they purely exist for the purposes of selling toys rather than telling a meaningful story. Also, the writing within Dragon Ball Super has taken a massive hit. Usually within each Dragon Ball story arc, there are multiple plot lines occurring at the same time. Take for example the Buu arc, where there's the A plot which involves Majin Buu, whether if he's battling against one of the Z fighters or if he's with Hercule. Then there's the B plot, which usually consists of a character training, preparing to confront Majin Buu, and then you have the C plot, which is usually another character who is training, or it's people who are observing the fights unfold like Dende and Hercule, or the Supreme Kai and Kibito. The Buu arc does a fantastic job of juggling multiple plot lines at the same time, but Super instead is very simplistic, with the majority of the time the story being centered around a singular A plot. This oversimplification of the story reduces the amount of time that we can spend with certain characters, as the show very quickly becomes the Goku and Vegeta show. The issues with Dragon Ball Super began from the very beginning of the story, with the first two arcs retelling the movies Battle of Gods and Resurrection F. Aside from the fact that we've seen this content adapted much better in their movie adaptations, the Dragon Ball Super anime ended up having terrible pacing, with Battle of Gods being told from episodes 1 to 14 and the Resurrection F movie being adapted from episodes 15 to 27. So before we get to any new original content, we have to sit through 27 episodes of recap, which does a terrible job of adapting these movies. I mean, these two story arcs were adapted due to Toei Animation not having enough material to create a new series from the very first episode. They pretty much needed 6 months worth of recap in order for Toriyama to write some script outlines for them in order to organize their production team for the series. At this point, it's a well-known fact that Dragon Ball Super had very little planning and pre-production, and this is the most evident in the sloppy art and animation that we see in the early episodes, and I don't think anybody could forget the abomination that was Dragon Ball Super Episode 5. Even Akira Toriyama had chimed in with the issues that he had about the quality of the Dragon Ball Super anime. He stated that he put Dragon Ball behind him, but seeing how much that the live action film had annoyed him, and how he had revised the script for the anime movie Battle of Gods, and how he's complaining about the quality of the TV anime, he states that somewhere along the line, Dragon Ball is a series that he likes too much to ever leave alone. Back in 2016, animators were vocal on Twitter about the quality of Dragon Ball Super, and one had openly stated that the team who are working on Dragon Ball Super are beyond help, stating that the animation director is snowed under with work and that the scheduling is totally disorganized. So from the early release of Dragon Ball Super, the series wasn't off to a good start. And it's no wonder that the Dragon Ball Super anime had problems throughout its run. The inconsistent animation quality was a glaring issue throughout the series, and quality varied from episode to episode. A lot of frames looked very quickly drawn and poorly animated. Certain moments in the series which should have had us on the edge of our seat had left us feeling very underwhelmed. Additionally, Dragon Ball Super had made a distinctive shift in its visual style, which had further divided fans. Dragon Ball Z was known for its gritty aesthetic. It was a product of its time, being an anime from the 90s. There are so many scenes in the original Dragon Ball anime which are depicted with this amazing atmosphere and aesthetic, and in contrast, Dragon Ball Super had opted for a much cleaner and more polished look. And for some, including myself, this had come across as being way too cartoonish, with the bright colors and the soft art lines being at odds with the tone that we have come to expect from Dragon Ball. They definitely were trying to modernize the series with Super for a new audience, but I think that the decisions that they made with the visual style of the anime had made it feel way less serious and impactful. I mean, Dragon Ball Z aired from 1989 to 1995, and yeah, while we do look back at that series with nostalgia goggles, even the 90s anime had its fair share of poorly animated scenes, but I feel like it's nothing in comparison to the poorly animated, brightly colored Dragon Ball Super scenes. So a mixture of inconsistent animation quality as well as a shift in the visual style had led to Super having this plastic, cartoony, bright tone in comparison to Dragon Ball Z, which had more of a grittier, darker visual tone. Now, I want to talk about how Dragon Ball Super handles characters. Let's begin by discussing its handling of Goku's character. You'd think that writing the protagonist of Dragon Ball, someone who is so iconic and simple, would be easy, but the issue with the way that Dragon Ball Super portrays Goku is that he comes across as a one-dimensional, bumbling idiot. A lot of people defend how Dragon Ball Super portrays Goku, but in my opinion, he is definitely written to be dumber than what he was in the original Dragon Ball series. Now, people do defend how Goku is portrayed in Super by stating that Goku made terrible decisions in the original manga, like giving Cell a Senzu Bean or deciding to destroy his Potara when he had fought Kid Buu, but I feel like each of these things can be explained off with a plausible explanation. Goku's reasoning for handing Cell a Senzu Bean was that he had faith in his son's potential, and while initially this did prove to be an error on Goku's part, even Piccolo pointing it out to him, Goku's faith in Gohan had proven to be right when he had attained Super Saiyan 2 and had defeated Cell. Sure, Goku made a mistake by giving Cell the Senzu Bean, but because of his errors, he ended up paying the ultimate price by sacrificing his own life when Cell was about to blow up the Earth. These mistakes had consequences. Even look at Goku destroying the Potara earring against Kid Buu. He had reached his limit. Vegeta had to intervene in order to buy Goku at least a minute worth of time so that he could recover some of his power. Goku's reasoning for not wanting to use the Potara earrings was that Kid Buu was fighting on his own, and he had thought that it would be unfair for him not to fight Kid Buu on equal terms, which is why he did not want to rely upon the power of fusion. Before, it seemed like this argument would not have mattered because Kid Buu was actually using the powers of Gohan, Goten, Trunks, and Piccolo. But in this instance, you can't really argue with Goku's reasoning. I say all of this to point out the fact that Goku's character by nature is innocent and pure-hearted. He has several moments of cluelessness within Dragon Ball Z, but they never overstay their welcome. Goku had come across as very likable and charismatic in the original series due to him being humble and down to earth. While there was all of this charm to his character, he also had flaws which were genuine and they were treated as such. Goku's tendency to misjudge others due to his trusting nature had often led to him suffering real consequences, and this had added layers of depth to his character. In contrast, Dragon Ball Super portrays Goku as a complete moron. He makes reckless and irresponsible decisions which not only endanger the lives of his friends and family, but reality as a whole, and this is all for a single-minded pursuit of wanting a good fight. I mean, his love for fighting is exaggerated to the point of stupidity. He makes impulsive decisions without thinking about the repercussions. Think about the sacrifice that Goku makes by wanting to stay in Otherworld after Cell was defeated. If this was Dragon Ball Super Goku, he would have wanted Gohan and the others to wish him back so that he could continue fighting. But at the end of the Cell arc, Goku makes the selfless decision to stay in Otherworld so that the threats that follow him would no longer come to Earth. So he made the decision not to return. In a similar way, Goku didn't appear and defeat Majin Buu because he had wanted a challenge for the next generation to overcome. Goku was aware that he's not going to be here for that long. He's only here for 24 hours. He wants the next generation to deal with the problems of Earth on their own. The thing is, each of these decisions, whether if they behavior were selfish or selfless had resulted in consequences for Goku's character as well as the story as a whole. Goku not deciding to defeat Buu when he needed to had resulted in the Earth being destroyed, along with the deaths of all of his friends and family. In the original story, Goku's character was held accountable for his decisions in some way or another. But Dragon Ball Super rarely ever holds Goku's character accountable, especially for some of these stupid things that he does. Dragon Ball Super's portrayal of Goku strips him of his maturity and wisdom, something which he had built up through years of battle experience. In the original manga, Goku has been portrayed as somebody who is dependable. You always have a feeling of reassurance with him, like he knows what he is doing. People often misinterpret Goku's character as being selfish, and it doesn't help that the Team 4-Star abridged had led to this idea of Goku being a bad parent spreading across the casual fandom. Moments like Goku training with Gohan during the Cell arc and then sacrificing himself during the Cell games, along with his relationship with Pan and his family at the end of Dragon Ball Z, refute all of these notions of Goku being a selfish and terrible father. I'm not saying that Goku is perfect as a character. He does have his flaws, but in the original series, these flaws were acknowledged, and like I've mentioned several times, there were repercussions for every bad decision that he had made. Dragon Ball Super ruins Goku's character by dumbing him down and rewriting him into a naive, immature version of himself, who at first glance doesn't appear to have a finely honed ability in martial arts. The problem is Super exaggerates Goku's innocence and his stupidity. In the original series, Goku was only really a simpleton outside of battles, but Dragon Ball Super makes him a simpleton in battles too. But if you know Goku's character, one area that he had expertise in was in battle. But now that he's a bumbling idiot in and out of fights, he lacks that maturity which we had come to love within the Cell and Buu arc. I remember watching those arcs as a kid and thinking, despite Cell and Buu being really strong, my confidence was that Goku was always going to be there, and he seemed like he had something up his sleeve in order to deal with the threat that was present. Dragon Ball Super's portrayal of Goku in comparison does not ignite the same level of confidence that I had in his character from before. And this is yet again another example of lazy writing in Super, where characters are reduced and boiled down to one-dimensional traits, which leaves them feeling bland and very uninteresting. Another character who suffers massively within Dragon Ball Super is Vegeta. Understandably, Vegeta is a massive fan favorite character who had undergone a strong positive character arc in Dragon Ball Z. But in Dragon Ball Super, despite all of the growth that he's experienced in the past, he is relegated to a secondary role. Despite there being a lot of potential for future character development for Vegeta, a lot of the key moments involving his character are handed over to Goku instead. One notable example, which I haven't ever quite gotten over, is in the Resurrection F arc, where Vegeta had the perfect opportunity to defeat Frieza, a character who was linked to the suffering of his past, but Vegeta's moment of redemption was stolen from him, as Goku had appeared out of nowhere, robbing him of the victory at the nth hour. This undermines the growth of his character, and it reduces him down to being a foil for Goku. It's disappointing that Vegeta's history and his own personal struggles are overshadowed for the sake of Goku having another victory. I mean, you do this once, fair enough, but you continue to do this, then it stagnates the development of Vegeta's character. Dragon Ball Super also introduces numerous power-ups and transformations for both Goku and Vegeta, but they all end up feeling very shallow without the emotional and narrative weight that previous transformations had. Now, I am going to be talking a lot more about transformations in Dragon Ball Super and how they were handled in comparison to the original series later in the video. Now, in summary, with Goku and Vegeta's characters, instead of building upon their established character arcs, Super dilutes them into their basic character traits, and neither of them end up resonating well with fans who have come to love them from the original series. Super also sidelines a lot of other beloved characters like Gohan, Piccolo, Goten, Trunks, and the other Z fighters. Each of these characters played major roles within Dragon Ball, but in Super they are reduced as spectators, or they play secondary roles without any significant contribution to the story. Take for example Gohan, who had a major role during the Cell arc and even in the Buu arc, but in Dragon Ball Super he just seems lost. After his growth from a shy child to becoming the hero who had defeated Cell, fans had expected Gohan to continue developing and to become stronger, at least expecting him to keep up with his training while he was studying. Instead, in Super, Gohan spends most of the time on the sidelines, struggling to regain his strength that he had once had. Other characters like Piccolo are also very underutilized, utilized. And then you have Goten and Trunks, who showed a lot of promise in the Buu arc, but in Super they are reduced to childlike roles, even to the point of them not being allowed to participate in the Tournament of Power because they were children. But in the Buu arc, it was okay for them to battle against Majin Buu, a powerful creature who could destroy the earth in one blast. Attempts are made to give relevancy to Krillin, Tien, Master Roshi, and Piccolo during the Tournament of Power arc, but again, anything that they do is very quickly overshadowed by Goku and Vegeta. So their inclusion, while being nice, lacks any substance, and all of it is just superficial fluff which doesn't add anything of value to their character. In an attempt to appeal to new audiences, Dragon Ball Super misses the mark, as instead of developing and writing a good story around these classic characters, we focus on Goku being a moron for the 50th time. Yeah, what I want to say is that there is a lot of wasted potential with the wider cast of the Z Fighters. Now, another problem that I have is the way that Dragon Ball Super handles villains. Unlike the iconic antagonists of Dragon Ball Z, the villains within Dragon Ball Super feel shallow with motivations that lack depth. Each new villain, whether if it's Jiren, Zamasu, Moro, or Granola, or even with the return of Frieza, they are all introduced with great potential. This is something that you'll notice with Dragon Ball Super. The premise is always more fascinating than the end result. By the time that the arc ends up concluding, you quickly realize that these villains are one-dimensional threats, and their interesting premise was squandered as the writing fails to live up to our expectations. Take for example the powerhouse Jiren introduced during the Tournament of Power arc. This is a perfect example of how Super tends to focus more on strength rather than narrative substance. He's hyped as Goku's ultimate opponent, but his motivations as a character are lacking, as he has a vague backstory of wanting to gain power after suffering a tragic loss, and aside from this very brief reveal of his past, we never really explore anything else to do with his character. Jiren lacks that personal connection and the emotional complexity that other villains like Cell and Frieza had, which made them so memorable. Frieza had an intense hatred for the Saiyans, and yet feared the emergence of a Super Saiyan, and Cell in contrast was designed to be a perfect being, made from the cells of the greatest warriors on Earth, and he was the culmination of Dr. Gero's research. These villains were more than just obstacles who stood in Goku's way, they were fully fleshed out antagonists. I mean, even villains like Majin Buu were compelling, and I'd even go as far as to say that Kid Buu with his mindless babbling is more of an interesting villain than Jiren. And then we have Zamasu, who started off with a very intriguing premise with his Zero Mortals plan, with him criticizing the gods and their lack of oversight over the mortals, but this interesting idea spiraled into a convoluted mess as we had multiple fusions and transformations, with time travel being included in the mix, traveling to the future, back to the present multiple times, and the fact that everything that Zamasu had wanted to achieve ended up being undone by Deus Ex Machina solution thanks to the intervention of Zeno, who had destroyed the timeline. It felt like it had undermined the threat of Zamasu's character, as well as the impact of this story arc. Future Trunks and Mai ended up living with a alternative reality timeline where there is already a Future Trunks and Mai. Seeing this image of two Future Trunkses and two Mais sat with Bulma is just enough to tell you how bad this story arc was. It is really telling when Dragon Ball Sparking Zero does a much better job of telling the story arc via a what if scenario, but instead of Goku Black there's Gohan Black, and the ending of that what if scenario is a much better ending than what we had received within the anime and the manga. Similarly, Moro and Granola, who were introduced in the Dragon Ball Super manga, also suffer from being shallow one-dimensional characters. I was really excited for Moro. He was introduced as a magic-wielding threat, but as the story arc drags on and the fights against him become more and more redundant, Moro had proven to be yet another boring villain who had lacked to establish any real threat or tension within the story, and things got very old very quickly with him. Then Granola was introduced as somebody who was revenge driven, initially presenting with complex motivations, but yet again he became a victim of a rushed power up, and the solution to defeat him was very quick, thus robbing the opportunity for Granola having a solid story of vengeance and redemption being told around his character. Super focuses on keeping plot moving with flashy battles and transformations, and this is what results in the villains within the series being so forgettable. Now, in terms of the story arcs, Battle of Gods had started out with a very promising introduction to the Super story, as Goku was revealed to attain a new form called Super Saiyan God, and we were introduced to the concept of Gods of Destruction with Beerus, along with angelic figures who accompany Gods of Destruction like Whis. Goku's fight against Beerus had ended in a draw, and we learned that the Super Saiyan God form was attained through uniform purifying 6 pure of heart Saiyans via a ritual, but this concept of borrowed power had a lot of potential, but it was abandoned as the story continues. The Resurrection F arc was banking on nostalgia with the return of Frieza, who out of nowhere had trained for a couple of months and had returned with the Golden Frieza transformation. Now, while it wasn't the most compelling story and it was relying heavily on nostalgia, it was still pretty fun until Whis had reset all of the events of the movie with yet another Deus Ex Machina plot device. One of the most unforgivable things about Resurrection F was the decision to not allow Vegeta to have a resolution with Frieza. A great character moment for Vegeta was robbed from him by Goku's intervention, and the entirety of Resurrection F just felt like a missed opportunity, and this really was a big damper on this story arc for me. And this isn't even mentioning how Super Saiyan Blue had appeared out of nowhere. So yeah, Frieza's return to the story was banking heavily on nostalgia, and I was always doubtful whether if bringing an old villain back was going to be a right decision, and ultimately the execution wasn't exceptional, but the return of Frieza was, I think, average at best. With the main issues with the Resurrection F arc again being the sudden introduction of Super Saiyan Blue, along with the introduction of Golden Frieza. The cherry on top was Whis reversing time at the end of the story arc. With the Universe 6 arc, it offered us some exciting possibilities, especially with new Saiyans being introduced like Kaba, Cauliflower, and Kale. And you also had very strong opponents like Hit being introduced. The Universe 6 arc went a bit crazy with the power scaling, as fighters ended up jumping to god tier levels of power with very minimal effort, and this really did affect a lot of the power progression that we had seen in the story up until this point. The Universe 6 arc had also introduced us to this concept of S-cells, which had totally undermined everything that we know about the Super Saiyan transformation up until this point. In the end, the Universe 6 tournament arc felt like skill and strategy was exchanged for power boosts dominating fights as a whole, with Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta being easily defeated by Hit, with Goku purposefully getting out of bounds against his battle with Hit just so that Monaka could have an opportunity to fight Hit, which again plays upon that moronic caricature that Goku has become, as he's unable to tell that Monaka is a weakling. So another time that Dragon Ball Super relies upon nostalgia is during the Future Trunks arc, where Trunks returns with an interesting premise where we're promised a darker storyline with some actual high stakes which are being incorporated, but as the story continues we see so much plot armor, with Trunks attaining a sudden Super Saiyan Rage transformation without any build up whatsoever, with Goku Black achieving the Super Saiyan Rose form which easily outpaces Super Saiyan Blue with no reason explained again, and then the entire events of the story arc are erased yet again with another Deus Ex Machina, with Zeno erasing the timeline in order to solve the conflict, which again feels lazy and it robs Trunks of any meaningful resolution to the events that have unfolded in his timeline. The Future Trunks arc aimed to tell a darker story, but it fumbled massively with its inconsistent storytelling, with Goku once again proving to be a moron, with him forgetting the sealing talisman for the Mafuba, and power scaling once again going completely out of the window, with Super Saiyan Blue Vegito not even being strong enough to defeat Fused Zamasu, and it was actually Super Saiyan Rage Trunks which ended up delivering the finishing blow for some strange reason. Now following this we have the Tournament of Power arc. So while Goku wasn't entirely responsible for the Tournament of Power because he didn't know that Zeno was going to be erasing universes during this tournament, Beerus and Whis did point out to Goku not to interfere with Zeno as it could have disastrous outcomes, but he had ignored these warnings and instead had decided to remind Zeno of this tournament due to his selfish desire to fight powerful opponents. One of the major issues of the Tournament Power arc is the fact that it had a very massive roster of characters participating, so it was hard to really spend any meaningful time with any of them, so a lot of characters ended up being disposable filler characters in a massive chaotic scene which had focused instead heavily on Goku, with a handful of highlight moments for Vegeta, Gohan and the others, but nothing of real substance which you can really recall. Now, the Tournament of Power had established a threat that Zeno was going to be erasing universes which had lost, but despite the high stakes being established for the story arc, it was hard to really believe, as we had assumed that angels like Whis would be able to reverse time to undo any universes that were destroyed, and later we learned that Zeno did plan on destroying all of existence if the winner of the tournament ended up making a selfish wish with the Super Dragon Balls, but because the winner, Android 17, had wished to bring back all of the universes that were erased, it ended the story arc on a pretty anticlimactic note, making the Tournament of Power arc feel like another style of a substance story arc, where we had the cool Ultra Instinct transformation introduced, but aside from that, nothing of consequence had occurred from the beginning to the end of the arc. Following this, we had the Galactic Prisoner arc, and Moro was introduced as a villain who had reminded me a lot of villains of the past. But again, the story had let down Moro's character with so many drawn out battles involving him, with redundant power-ups being introduced once again, and all of this had resulted in the appeal of Moro's character waning over time. Goku's indecision to get rid of Moro and sparing him repeatedly had contradicted his character growth, and it had resulted in Goku feeling naive rather than a principled warrior, somebody who has gone through situations like this multiple times, but instead he's making the same mistakes that he made against Raditz in the Saiyan arc. The Moro arc once again ended by falling back on predictable resolutions. Moro ends up merging with the Earth, with Goku ascending into autonomous Ultra Instinct as he creates a Susanoo-like spirit avatar which attacks Moro, and in the end Goku receives an immense amount of energy from Oob which allows him to defeat Moro. The Granola arc had a lot of potential to add a story of substance to the lore of Dragon Ball, especially with Granola's unique backstory as a lone Cerealian survivor who was haunted by the destruction caused by the Saiyans. His story had given us suggestions of a complex journey which was shaped by a lot of personal loss that he'd endured and his thirst for justice against the Saiyans. But then the decision to make Granola the strongest in the universe via a wish made on the Dragon Balls had undermined all of his growth and his potential as a character, I think. With him rapidly achieving this power-up, Granola's growth had seemed to be very shallow, and it lacked any substantial personal sacrifice which had warranted the growth that he had undergone. And then from this point onwards, the nuanced premise of the Granola arc had spiraled down into a standard battle shonen arc, which did very little to explore Granola's character or the history of the Saiyans, because I loved all of the flashbacks that we received with Bardock interacting with the Cerealian survivors, and there was a lot of promise here for further story development, but none of these moments were really built upon, as all of this was ultimately overshadowed by formulaic power-ups, repetitive fights. All of this had robbed the narrative of any depth, as well as not really exploring any more of Granola's character. The things that I did like about the Granola arc were the introduction of Ultra Ego, along with Black Frieza making a surprise reveal at the end of the story arc, which again continues this trend of Dragon Ball Super having fascinating premises, but it's yet to be revealed whether if Black Frieza is going to have a story that's worth telling, as it's been over a year since this new form has been revealed, which was strong enough to defeat both Ultra Instinct and Ultra Ego. After this, the Dragon Ball Super manga, for some strange reason, after the reveal of Black Frieza at the end of the Granola arc, had started a superhero prequel story. Now, this high school saga was a mediocre slice of life story which felt like a weird spin-off story with Trunks as the main character. This story arc had come about after Toyotaro had expressed that he had wanted to write a series with Trunks as the protagonist. Toriyama had instead advised Toyotaro to instead make a story arc with Trunks as the lead, and to make him a superhero too. This honestly sounds like a poor rehash of the Great Saiyaman story arc, and not to mention, making Trunks a superhero within this Dragon Ball Super story arc, it undermines Trunks' earlier character writing when he wasn't too impressed by seeing Gohan's Great Saiyaman outfit when he is younger. In summary, this story arc centered around Trunks has him dealing with high school dilemmas, supernatural rumors, along with him pursuing a romance with Mai, which I know that any of you who have watched the original Dragon Ball series won't be too much of a fan of, considering that she is older than Bulma, and it's just gross seeing Trunks chase after a 50-year-old woman. The dynamic between future Mai and future Trunks did work. However, trying to build a romance with the present timeline version of Trunks and Mai is so creepy in my opinion. So much just doesn't make sense, and it contradicts the established character writing of the past. The storyline of this high school arc traps the characters in a series of juvenile misadventures, and it adds very little to their characters. Trunks, who had previously faced life-threatening battles, he now has to grapple with mundane issues like school dances and data disks, and this sidelines all of the character development that fans have expected from him. There were several opportunities to explore Trunks and Goten's characters, especially after their growth spurt, but the story was squandered, and in the end, the high school saga, which had spanned from chapters 88 to 90, felt like a worse version of the Great Saiyaman arc, which in itself was one of the least popular storylines of Dragon Ball. After this prequel to the superhero movie, the worst fears of fans were actualized when it was revealed that the superhero movie would be getting a complete comprehensive retelling within the manga. This wasn't a succinct retelling like Battle of Gods, which in the Dragon Ball Super manga spanned 4 chapters. The superhero movie instead got a detailed manga remake, recreating the movie scene by scene. This essentially pushed back any new Dragon Ball Super manga content for months, with Black Frieza now feeling like a distant memory. Instead, we were served up a movie remake which nobody had asked for, forcing us to be stuck with material which is from a perfectly good standalone movie which was made over a year ago. Now, because Toyotaro is sticking so closely to the events of the movie, it ends up contradicting what he has written within the manga for the Tournament of Power arc, or the Moro and Granola arcs. For example, like Broly not even being considered a threat in the Granola arc, but in the manga version of the superhero movie, he is teased as somebody to watch out for. In Dragon Ball Super, the charm of attaining a new transformation feels more like a flashy power boost rather than a earned milestone. Very early on in Dragon Ball Z, the concept of Super Saiyan was established as a mythical legend, with Nappa first name-dropping the transformation in chapter 204. There was even a point that Vegeta had assumed that he had attained the form after he had Dende heal him so that he could attain a much-needed Zenkai power boost during his fight against Frieza. In my opinion, the way that Dragon Ball handled Super Saiyan transformations up until the end of the Cell arc was effective and rooted in character growth. The threat of Cell and the androids forced the Saiyans to look for a level beyond Super Saiyan. This resulted in multiple forms being attained by Vegeta, Trunks, Goku, and Gohan. Vegeta was the first to reveal Super Saiyan Grade 2, Trunks then showcased Grade 3, which we learned that Vegeta could also perform, and Goku too, as all three of them had come to realize in one way or another that Grade 3 was a bulky form which would be useless due to trading off speed for more power. Gohan and Goku demonstrated Super Saiyan Grade 4 following their training in the Hyperbolic Time Chamber. Grade 4 is considered to be the peak of the original Super Saiyan transformation, as it offers a refinement of speed and strength. However, this still wasn't enough to defeat Cell, as Gohan went on to achieve the true level beyond the Super Saiyan, which was titled Super Saiyan Grade 5 or Super Saiyan 2. This was not a random transformation. We had an entire B-plot centered around the Saiyans' efforts to attain a new height. Each Super Saiyan grade represented a step towards the end goal. Every milestone felt earned through hard work and persistent effort. Super Saiyan 2 was special because it represented the combined efforts of Goku, Gohan, Trunks, and Vegeta, each trying to attain this form. One succeeded while the others were left awestruck at the proof that a level beyond a Super Saiyan does exist. However, with the introduction of Super Saiyan 3, we begin to understand where Dragon Ball Super had drawn inspiration from in terms of how it handles transformations in the story. Super Saiyan 3 boils down to a grand spectacle which came from out of nowhere during a scene where Goku was trying to distract Buu for a short period of time. No explanation was given in terms of how this form is attained, and it's just widely accepted for what it is. Goku in the original Dragon Ball series wasn't a bumbling moron making reckless decisions which endanger his loved ones. He had demonstrated considerable knowledge and he had battle wisdom to back up his strength. I mean, take for example him knowing the limitations of Super Saiyan 3, and he had determined that it was not worth teaching this to Gohan, Goten, and Trunks in the lead up to the battle against Buu. This form has little to no true application on the battlefield due to its immense energy drain, thus limiting its use for short durations only. Super Saiyan 3 was not enough, and Toriyama knew this too, as he still needed a new way to introduce a transformation into the story while keeping things fresh and not making it a rehash of what has already been done before. In my opinion, Toriyama impressively solved this problem by incorporating the concept of fusion into the story, which instead of giving us a new transformation had given us a new fused stronger character who was able to showcase previously established transformations. Then we have Battle of Gods, which introduced Super Saiyan God to us, a new form that was done very effectively in my opinion, with Goku needing to perform a ritual with 6 righteous Saiyans in order to achieve this form. This was a great way for the Saiyans to understand that this new transformation requires direct help from others, which is usually an issue for them due to their sense of pride and wanting to earn their victories in battle with their own strength, as they don't want to rely on the help of others. Now, Resurrection F released a few months before the Dragon Ball Super anime had premiered, and it featured Goku and Vegeta attaining yet another form, and this was titled Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan, or as it is now known as Super Saiyan Blue. Instead of them deciding to build upon Super Saiyan God, we had an entirely new form with a new hair color Super that made Super Saiyan God redundant before it even had the chance to be around long enough to be relevant. Super Saiyan Blue is basically when a Super Saiyan God achieves Super Saiyan. If we consider the fact that the original Super Saiyan form has a 50 times multiplier, this theoretically makes Super Saiyan Blue 50 times stronger than Super Saiyan God. But in the series, it was made out to be that Super Saiyan Blue is realistically 5 times stronger than base Super Saiyan God, which is still very impressive. But this doesn't detract from the fact that Super Saiyan Blue is a significant power creep which had come from nowhere, and it was given to both Goku and Vegeta during the Resurrection F arc. From here on out, Dragon Ball Super goes truly silly with the introduction of Super Saiyan color forms, with Rose being a pink head power-up, which does look cool but again has no explanation behind its existence. This is followed up with Trunks' power-up titled Super Saiyan Rage, which nobody really knows anything about. The Tenement of Power had multiple transformations like Vegeta's evolved Super Saiyan Blue form and Goku's Ultra Instinct form. Ultra Instinct in concept, like Super Saiyan God, is a great transformation, but the application of Ultra Instinct has been so inconsistent. Initially, Goku struggled to stay in the form, then suddenly had awakened true Ultra Instinct out of nowhere. Contrastingly, Vegeta goes on to awaken Ultra Ego, a technique that is used by gods of destruction, which is a great way to set Vegeta down a contrasting path to Goku, who is mastering Ultra Instinct, which is the opposite of Ultra Ego. True Ultra Instinct and Ultra Ego were both defeated by Black Frieza, which means that there are more forms yet to come, adding to the confusing, nonsensical mess that Super has become. And this isn't even mentioning Broly's full power Super Saiyan form, which was revealed in the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, where Broly grows even larger in size and his hair and eyebrows transform into this bright green color. And then how could I forget the new forms from the superhero movie, which are the Gohan Beast form or Orange Piccolo. Now, some of these forms, like I've mentioned in this video, have a lot of potential, but all too often these transformations are written to be shallow, superficial power-ups which have a few minutes in the limelight before they are made irrelevant because an all-new shiny transformation has turned up. Now, because of the frequency of these transformations, they are often presented as quick solutions at the end of a story arc rather than major achievements for the characters, and this ultimately robs the significance of the transformation. Each new form should ideally raise the stakes and be grounded in the narrative, but in Dragon Ball Super, transformations unfortunately are more about visual appeal than story progression. They are like last-minute trump cards revealed for no other reason than to defeat the big bad and to showcase a new hair color that hasn't been seen before. Dragon Ball Super turns power-ups into soulless cash grabs, which are designed for the purposes of selling a new Goku figure with a new hair color. While yes, transformations in shonen anime and manga are mainly for this purpose of selling merchandise, at least when it was done in the past it was effective. Super just undermines what made transformations so compelling and worth being excited about in the original series. Dragon Ball Super also has several retcons, like Potara Fusion only lasting for 1 hour for mortals, or the explanation for the Super Saiyan transformation being as a result of having enough S cells. According to this new law, Saiyans accumulate these S cells through kindness or training. This reduces the significance of the transformation down to genetics instead of persistent hard work and emotional struggle. You see the massive downgrade that this explanation provides by comparing Goku's original transformation on planet Namek with how easily Universe 6 Saiyans like Kaba and Cauliflower are able to transform in Dragon Ball Super. For Goku, becoming a Super Saiyan was a monumental moment which was rooted in rage and grief over the death of Krillin, and it represented a major milestone in the series. The emotional weight of that transformation had resonated deeply with fans who had felt the significance of Goku's anger and the loss that he had suffered at the hands of Frieza. The issue that Dragon Ball Super has with giving Universe 6 Saiyans easy Super Saiyan transformations was something that we did see happen earlier with Goten and Trunks in the Buu arc, who were both able to attain the Super Saiyan forms without any real effort, which was something that I wasn't a big fan of. In Super, it makes things even worse as the new trigger for the Super Saiyan transformation appears to involve something way less intriguing than before. The Super Saiyan form is now reduced to a tingly feeling in the back, and this is just taking a massive dump on the struggle and intensity that the Saiyans have had to endure to attain the Super Saiyan form up until that point in the series. The S cells tingling back explanation was a step back in my opinion, as it strips away the mysterious allure that made the Super Saiyan transformation so legendary. This explanation feels so contrived and is similar to how Star Wars introduced the concept of midichlorians to explain the Force, reducing a mystical concept to a boring, half half-baked explanation that didn't need to be made. By grounding the Super Saiyan transformation in genetics via the S cells, Super chooses to cheaply credit transformations to an arbitrary concept that Saiyans have no control over influencing. In Dragon Ball Super, power scaling goes out of the window and it's very inconsistent, and this massively impacts the tension and stakes of battles. In the original Dragon Ball series, power progression followed a logical path of intense training and struggle. Super frequently has characters achieve massive power boosts with little to no explanation. Now take for example Frieza, who in Dragon Ball Super returns with god levels of power only after a few months of training. His quick leap in strength by attaining the Golden Frieza form defies the expectations that were set in the original Dragon Ball series, where Goku, Vegeta and the others would train tirelessly to attain new levels. Frieza's rapid increase in power feels like a convenient shortcut in order to tell a story rather than a natural progression of power. And then there are characters like Gohan and Android 17 who further highlight this issue, as Gohan, who hadn't seriously trained for years, suddenly reaches a level of power comparable to Super Saiyan Blue Goku after only training for a short duration of time. Similarly, Android 17 goes from a quiet life on an island to where he is now standing toe-to-toe with god tier opponents in the Tournament of Power, and again he was also revealed to be on par with Super Saiyan Blue Goku. And this is considering the fact that he has not taken part in any major battles since the Cell arc. This lack of consistent power scaling makes it very difficult for us to be invested in the battles, since the strength of characters appear to change on a whim based entirely upon whatever plot armor the writers want to include within the story arc. When you have characters who gain godlike power with very little effort, the stakes quickly dissolve, and battles feel less like tests of skill and growth and more like displays of arbitrary power. Instead of strategic hard-fought victories, Super relies on sudden, convenient boosts of power to resolve a lot of the conflicts in the series, and in the end it leads to fans being detached from the conflicts of the story and their outcomes. Dragon Ball Super's heavy reliance on nostalgia is evident, as they use fan-favorite characters and familiar story beats to appeal to long-time viewers without truly advancing the plotline. Classic villains like Frieza make a return, fan-favorite characters like Future Trunks also make a reappearance, and while the initial premise is interesting, the overall storylines quickly fall short of our expectations, as these decisions with the story, which are rooted in nostalgia, end up becoming nothing more than just fan service. Rather than building upon concepts like tournament arcs or power-ups and transformations from Dragon Ball Z, Super instead treats these ideas like a checklist of popular Dragon Ball Z elements, as they go through one by one things that have been done previously, as they try to recreate the success of the past by offering nothing original and new to the plot, and instead relying upon the nostalgia of fans by including heaps of fan service, which makes a lot of what is in Dragon Ball Super, in its story to its transformations to the way that characters are written, lacking any sense of any depth and nuance, as concepts that were perfectly executed within the original manga are reduced to their simple bare bones. And again, the common trend within this video is that there are exciting premises, but they lack any substance, which leads to Dragon Ball Super being a really flashy series relying heavily on nostalgia, but offers nothing new and original in the way of building upon its characters or its story, and it ends up becoming a strange footnote in the history of Dragon Ball. I would even go as far as to say that Dragon Ball GT had way more heart and soul than whatever Dragon Ball Super has given to us. A lot of the issues that I have with Dragon Ball Super stem from the anime and the manga. As you'll know, there are three continuities of Dragon Ball Super: the anime continuity, the manga continuity, and the movie continuity. Out of all of these, I stick closely to the movie continuity as the most canon version of the events of Dragon Ball Super, and I treat the anime and manga versions of Super as fun side stories. The laziness and poor quality of this product was evident via the inconsistent animation within the anime, their decision to go with a less impactful visual style, which are giving these characters these simplistic cartoony plastic designs, and then characters being reduced to one-dimensional versions of themselves. Then you have the sidelining of characters like Vegeta, Gohan, Piccolo, and then the other Z fighters, and then villains who are constantly introduced to lack any complexity or memorable motivations, and then story arcs that are poorly written with rushed pacing and end up being resolved with Deus Ex Machina resolutions, the lack of any real stakes and tension within the plot, and the heavy reliance on nostalgia over substance. These are all of the reasons as to why I believe that Dragon Ball Super just is not a good product. So yeah, you've reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. In this video, I've tried to say that all of this is my own personal opinion, so try not to be too offended by it if you guys really love Dragon Ball Super. I did not want Super to be be a quick cash grab which pedaled back on a lot of the characterization and development of characters, and for it to be an anime which featured lazy animation that even Toriyama wasn't happy about. I do hope that with Dragon Ball Daima releasing, there is a emphasis on Dragon Ball products having better quality writing, art and animation, because if Super 2 was to go back and to adapt the Moro and Granola arcs, I hope that they improve upon whatever has been established within the manga, because I do feel like a lot of Dragon Ball Super has so much potential as long as it is executed and done right. So yeah, let me know all of your thoughts about Dragon Ball Super in the comments, and lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Dragon Ball video.
If you enjoy my content, then you can support my channel through Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or even through YouTube by becoming a channel member. You will gain access to exclusive channel perks and a Discord server which I frequently use. So become a member of my Zero Division and be the first to know about my upcoming videos. And once again, thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.